Have you ever noticed how certain women can make men completely change their minds without them even realizing it? How they get exactly what they want, leaving the man convinced it was his idea from the beginning. Carl Jung, the revolutionary Swiss psychologist, unveiled the deepest psychological mechanisms operating behind this fascinating dynamic. He discovered that there's an invisible game constantly happening between men and women, a game where the rules were never explained to men. What you're about to discover will shock you. Jung revealed how the feminine unconscious developed psychological strategies so sophisticated that most men can't even identify them, let alone resist them. These aren't conscious or malicious manipulations. They're evolutionary patterns engraved in the feminine psychological DNA for thousands of years. Prepare to have your eyes opened to a reality that few men truly understand. After this video, you'll never see interactions between men and women the same way again. 1. The emotional mirror, how she reflects your desires back. When Carl Jung studied the depths of human psychology, he discovered something remarkable about how women connect with men on an unconscious level. Women possess an extraordinary ability to become emotional mirrors, reflecting back exactly what a man wants to see and feel. This isn't calculated deception. It's an intuitive skill developed over thousands of years of evolution. Think about the last time you met a woman who seemed to understand you completely. She laughed at your jokes, shared your interests, and somehow knew exactly what to say to make you feel special. What Jung realized is that women have developed an almost supernatural ability to read the emotional landscape of a man's mind and then present themselves as the perfect complement to his desires. This mirroring happens on multiple levels. When you talk about your passion for music, she suddenly reveals her own deep appreciation for the same genre. When you mention your childhood dreams, she shares similar aspirations. When you express frustration about work, she offers exactly the kind of understanding and support you crave. It feels like destiny, like you've found your soulmate, but Jung understood this as something much more complex. The feminine unconscious operates like a sophisticated radar system, constantly scanning for emotional cues, verbal hints, and body language signals. Women pick up on things men don't even realize they're communicating. Your tone when you mention family, the way your eyes light up when discussing certain topics, the subtle shift in your posture when you feel confident or insecure. All of this information gets processed and stored. What makes this so powerful is that women don't just mirror your current self, they mirror your ideal self. They reflect back the man you want to become, the person you see yourself as in your best moments. When she looks at you with admiration and tells you how intelligent, funny, or talented you are, she's not just giving compliments. She's showing you a version of yourself that feels more real and more attractive than the one you see in the mirror every morning. Jung called this the anima projection, where men project their idealized feminine onto women, but women have learned to embody whatever version of femininity will best capture and hold a man's attention. She becomes the woman of his dreams by carefully studying what those dreams actually contain. The emotional mirror works because it satisfies one of the deepest human needs, the need to be truly seen and understood. When a woman reflects your thoughts, feelings, and desires back to you, it creates an intoxicating sense of connection. You feel like she gets you in a way no one else ever has. This emotional validation becomes addictive because it feeds your ego and makes you feel special, chosen, understood. But here's what most men miss. The reflection isn't always accurate. Sometimes women show you what you want to see, rather than what's actually there. They've learned that men fall in love with women who make them feel good about themselves, so they become experts at creating that feeling. They study your reactions, notice what makes you smile, what makes you feel confident, what makes you feel like a hero. This ability extends beyond just personality traits. Women mirror emotional states too. If you're feeling stressed, she becomes calm and nurturing. If you're feeling playful, she matches your energy. If you're feeling serious, she becomes thoughtful and deep. This emotional synchronization happens so naturally that most men never even notice it's happening. The power of the emotional mirror lies in its subtlety. Unlike obvious flattery or manipulation, mirroring feels authentic because it's based on real observation and genuine responsiveness. She's not lying about sharing your interests. She's genuinely finding ways to connect with the things that matter to you. She's not faking her emotional responses. She's actually feeling them because she's allowed herself to become emotionally attuned to your state. Jung understood that this mirroring serves an important evolutionary purpose. Women who could read and respond to male emotional needs were more likely to form strong pair bonds, which increased their chances of survival and successful child rearing. Over thousands of years, this ability became refined and instinctive. The challenge for men is learning to distinguish between genuine compatibility and skillful mirroring. Real connection involves both similarities and differences, moments of harmony and moments of tension. A woman who agrees with everything you say and shares all your interests might be mirroring rather than revealing her authentic self. Understanding this doesn't mean becoming cynical or distrustful. It means developing the awareness to see these dynamics clearly so you can make better choices about relationships and connections. 2. The vulnerability dance. The power of I need you. Jung discovered that one of the most potent psychological tools in the feminine arsenal is the strategic use of vulnerability. Women have mastered what he called the vulnerability dance, a delicate balance between strength and helplessness that triggers deep protective instincts in men. This isn't about being genuinely weak or needy. It's about understanding exactly when and how to reveal vulnerability to create maximum emotional impact. Men are hardwired to be protectors and problem solvers. When a woman says, "I need you," something primal activates in the male brain. Jung recognized this as an archetypal response that goes back to the beginning of human civilization. Men feel most valuable when they feel needed, and women have learned to tap into this fundamental desire in sophisticated ways. The vulnerability dance works because it's based on timing and authenticity. A woman doesn't just randomly express neediness. She waits for the perfect moment when her vulnerability will have the greatest impact. Maybe you've had a bad day and feel unimportant, and suddenly she reveals that she doesn't know how she'd handle a difficult situation without your advice. Maybe you're feeling disconnected from her, and she opens up about a fear or insecurity that makes you feel trusted and special. What makes this so effective is that it doesn't feel like manipulation. When a woman shares her vulnerability with you, it feels like intimacy. She's letting you see behind her strong, independent exterior to the softer, more fragile parts of herself. This creates a sense of closeness and specialness. She doesn't show this side to everyone, only to you. You become her protector, her confidant, her safe space. Jung understood that this vulnerability often comes in waves. A woman will be strong and capable most of the time, handling her own problems and making her own decisions. But then, at strategic moments, she'll reveal that she's struggling with something or feeling overwhelmed. She'll express doubt about her abilities or fear about the future. She'll admit that she doesn't feel safe or secure without your presence and support. The power lies in the contrast. If she were vulnerable all the time, it would lose its impact and might even become annoying. But because she's usually strong, those moments of vulnerability feel precious and important. You feel honored that she trusts you enough to show her weakness. You feel needed in a way that feeds your masculine identity and purpose. Women often use phrases that directly appeal to male protective instincts. "I don't know what I'd do without you. You make me feel so safe. I need your strength right now. These aren't just words. They're keys that unlock deep psychological responses in men. When you hear these phrases, you feel important, valuable, irreplaceable. Your chest swells with pride because you're fulfilling your role as protector and provider. The vulnerability dance also works because it creates emotional debt. When someone trusts you with their fears and weaknesses, you feel obligated to protect and support them. When a woman makes herself vulnerable to you, you naturally want to take care of her. This creates a bond that goes beyond simple attraction or compatibility. It creates a sense of responsibility and investment. You'll notice that women are masters of calibrating their vulnerability to each specific man. With a man who likes to feel intellectually superior, she might express confusion about complex topics and ask for his explanation. With a man who prides himself on emotional intelligence, she might share deep feelings and ask for his understanding. With a man who sees himself as practical and capable, she might reveal practical problems that need solving. The timing of vulnerability is crucial. Women often choose moments when men are feeling good about themselves or when they want to deepen the emotional connection. After you've accomplished something at work, she might reveal how proud she is of you and how much your success means to her security. After you've been helpful or supportive, she might express how much she depends on your strength and wisdom. What most men don't realize is that this vulnerability is often selective and strategic. The same woman who tells you she needs your protection might be completely self-sufficient in other areas of her life. She's not lying about feeling vulnerable. She's choosing to experience and express vulnerability specifically with you because she understands the powerful effect it has. The vulnerability dance creates a cycle of dependency and validation. You feel needed, so you provide support. She feels supported, so she expresses gratitude and continued need. This makes you feel even more valuable and important, so you continue providing support. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing, creating a strong emotional bond that can be difficult to break. Understanding this pattern doesn't mean becoming cold or unresponsive to genuine vulnerability. It means recognizing the difference between authentic emotional sharing and strategic vulnerability deployment. Real vulnerability comes with imperfect timing, genuine struggle, and doesn't always make you feel like a hero. Strategic vulnerability is perfectly timed, makes you feel special and needed, and often comes with subtle requests for specific types of support or commitment. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the Sim Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. 3. The silence that speaks louder. The psychological weapon of not saying. Carl Jung understood that in the realm of human psychology, what isn't said often carries more weight than what is. Women have mastered the art of strategic silence, using what Jung called pregnant pauses and meaningful quiet moments to communicate volumes without uttering a single word. This psychological tool is perhaps one of the most powerful and least understood aspects of feminine influence. When a woman goes silent, something profound happens in the male mind. Men are natural problem solvers, and silence creates a vacuum that demands to be filled. Jung observed that men experience silence from women as a puzzle that needs solving, a code that requires breaking. This isn't just about being quiet, it's about creating specific types of silence that trigger particular responses and emotions. The power of not saying works because it forces men to fill in the blanks with their own thoughts and fears. When a woman doesn't respond to a text message immediately, your mind starts racing. When she gives a short, clipped answer instead of her usual warmth, you begin analyzing what you might have done wrong. When she looks away instead of meeting your eyes, you start wondering what she's thinking and feeling. Women understand that men hate uncertainty, especially emotional uncertainty. They've learned that strategic silence creates just enough discomfort to make men pursue, explain, apologize, or try harder to regain connection. The silence becomes a form of communication that says everything without saying anything at all. Jung identified several types of strategic silence that women employ. There's the disappointed silence that follows when you've failed to meet an unspoken expectation. There's the hurt silence that communicates pain without explaining its source. There's the thoughtful silence that suggests deep contemplation about the relationship. Each type creates a different emotional response and motivates different behaviors from men. The disappointed silence is particularly effective because it makes men feel guilty without explicitly stating what they've done wrong. You know something is off, but you're not sure what. This uncertainty drives you to review your recent actions, words, and decisions, looking for the source of her disappointment. You find yourself apologizing for things you're not even sure you did, just to restore the harmony and connection. The hurt silence works by triggering men's protective instincts. When a woman goes quiet and withdrawn, appearing emotionally wounded, men naturally want to fix whatever is wrong, but because the source of the hurt isn't explicitly stated, you're left guessing and scrambling to make things right. This often leads to overcompensation, giving extra attention, affection, or concessions to heal wounds you can't even clearly identify. The thoughtful silence creates anxiety about the future of the relationship. When a woman becomes unusually quiet and seems to be processing deep thoughts, men often assume she's reconsidering her feelings or commitment. This fear of potential loss motivates men to become more attentive, romantic, and invested in proving their worth and securing the relationship. What makes strategic silence so powerful is its ambiguity. Because nothing is explicitly stated, you can't argue with it, defend against it, or even address it directly. You're left responding to your own interpretation of what the silence might mean. This puts women in a position of power because they can let your imagination do the work of creating pressure and motivation. Jung also recognized that women use silence to create space for men to reveal more about themselves. In conversations, strategic pauses and expectant quiet moments encourage men to keep talking, often leading them to share more than they originally intended. These moments of extended silence can cause men to fill the void with additional information, confessions, or promises they might not have made otherwise. The psychological impact of strategic silence extends beyond individual interactions. It creates patterns of behavior where men become hypervigilant to women's moods and emotional states. You start reading into every small change in tone, every brief pause, every slight shift in behavior. This constant emotional monitoring puts women in a position of influence because their smallest actions or non-actions can create significant responses. Women also use silence as a form of emotional regulation. When they're angry or upset, instead of exploding or arguing, they might withdraw into strategic quiet. This forces men to pursue them, to try to understand what's wrong, to work for emotional reconnection. The silence becomes a way of making men earn their way back into good graces. The timing of silence is crucial to its effectiveness. A woman might be talkative and engaged most of the time, making those moments of quiet stand out dramatically. The contrast makes the silence feel significant and loaded with meaning. If someone is always quiet, their silence doesn't carry the same psychological weight. Jung understood that this use of silence taps into deep masculine insecurities about being understood and accepted by women. Men often fear that women are constantly evaluating and judging them, and strategic silence feeds into these anxieties. When a woman goes quiet, it can feel like the evaluation process is happening in real time, and the results might not be favorable. The power of not saying also works because it allows women to communicate dissatisfaction or disappointment without being labeled as nagging or complaining. Instead of stating what's wrong, the silence conveys the message while maintaining plausible deniability. If confronted, she can claim she was just tired, distracted, or processing her thoughts. Understanding this psychological tool doesn't mean becoming immune to all silence or dismissing every quiet moment as manipulation. Sometimes silence is genuinely reflective, tired, or simply comfortable. The key is recognizing when silence is being used strategically versus when it's natural and authentic. 4. Intermittent validation. Why she only compliments you. Sometimes. Jung's research into behavioral psychology revealed one of the most powerful tools of influence known to human psychology: intermittent reinforcement. Women have intuitively mastered this principle, understanding that praise and validation given sporadically and unpredictably creates much stronger emotional bonds than constant, predictable compliments. This pattern of sometimes giving validation and sometimes withholding it creates what Jung called psychological addiction. The power of intermittent validation lies in how the human brain processes rewards. When you receive praise or recognition every time you do something, your brain quickly adapts and the reward loses its impact. But when praise comes at random, unpredictable intervals, your brain releases more dopamine and creates stronger neural pathways associated with seeking that validation. This is the same principle that makes gambling addictive. You never know when the next reward is coming. Women understand this instinctively. Early in relationships, they might shower you with compliments and admiration. You feel amazing, confident, and valued. Then gradually, the compliments become less frequent and more selective. You start working harder to earn them. When they do come, they feel more meaningful and impactful because they're not guaranteed. This pattern creates a psychological dependency that goes far beyond simple appreciation. You begin to crave her validation in a way that feels almost desperate. Her opinions about your appearance, your intelligence, your humor, and your worth start to matter more than your own self-assessment. When she compliments you, you feel on top of the world. When she doesn't, you wonder what's wrong or what you need to do differently. Jung observed that intermittent validation works particularly well with men because of how masculine psychology processes achievement and recognition. Men are often driven by external validation for their accomplishments, skills, and worth. When a woman becomes the primary source of this validation and then makes it unpredictable, she becomes incredibly important to his emotional well-being. The strategy often involves mixed signals that keep men guessing. One day, she might tell you how handsome you look, how proud she is of your success, or how much she admires your strength. The next day, she might barely acknowledge your efforts or seem distracted when you're trying to impress her. This inconsistency creates emotional uncertainty that keeps you constantly seeking her approval. Women also use comparative validation as part of this pattern. Sometimes they'll praise you in comparison to other men, making you feel special and chosen. Other times, they might mention admirable qualities in other men without acknowledging similar qualities in you. This creates competition anxiety and motivates you to work harder to earn her recognition and approval. The timing of intermittent validation is often strategic. Compliments might come after you've done something she wanted, creating a reward system that encourages specific behaviors, or they might come when she senses you're feeling insecure or considering other options, providing just enough validation to keep you engaged and committed. Jung noticed that this pattern often escalates over time. As men become more dependent on women's validation, they start modifying their behavior, appearance, and even personality to increase their chances of receiving praise. They begin dressing differently, changing their social circles, or pursuing different goals based on what seems to earn approval. The withdrawal of validation becomes particularly powerful once the pattern is established. When a woman who usually notices and compliments your efforts suddenly seems indifferent or distracted, it creates anxiety and self-doubt. You start questioning your worth, your attractiveness, your performance. You work harder, try new approaches, or seek reassurance through other means. Women often combine intermittent validation with emotional availability. Sometimes they're fully present, engaged, and appreciative. Other times, they seem distant, preoccupied, or less impressed by the same behaviors that previously earned praise. This emotional inconsistency keeps men off balance and constantly working to regain the connection and approval they once had. The psychological impact extends beyond just seeking compliments. Men begin to internalize the woman's approval as a measure of their own worth. When she's happy with them, they feel good about themselves. When she seems disappointed or unimpressed, they feel inadequate and motivated to do better. This gives women significant influence over men's self-esteem and decision-making. Jung understood that intermittent validation also creates trauma bonding. The highs of receiving unexpected praise feel amazing, while the lows of withdrawal create anxiety and desperation. This emotional roller coaster creates intense attachment because the relief and joy of validation feels so much stronger when it comes after periods of uncertainty or withdrawal. The pattern often involves raising and lowering standards unpredictably. Sometimes simple gestures earn enthusiastic appreciation. Other times, significant efforts receive minimal acknowledgement. This keeps men guessing about what will earn approval and motivates constant effort to figure out the ever-changing requirements. Women might also use intermittent validation around different aspects of masculinity. Sometimes they praise emotional intelligence and sensitivity. Other times they seem more impressed by traditional masculine traits like strength or success. This keeps men trying to be everything, constantly adapting their presentation based on what seems to earn approval in the moment. Understanding intermittent validation doesn't mean becoming immune to all praise or suspicious of every compliment. Genuine appreciation and recognition are important parts of healthy relationships. The key is recognizing when validation patterns are being used strategically to create dependency and when they represent authentic appreciation and connection. The goal isn't to avoid all intermittent validation, but to maintain your own internal sense of worth that doesn't depend entirely on external approval. When you have strong self-validation, you can appreciate compliments without becoming addicted to them or desperate when they're withdrawn. 5. The theater of emotions, how she rewrites reality. Jung discovered that women possess an extraordinary ability to reshape the emotional landscape of any situation through what he called emotional theater. This isn't about fake crying or dramatic outbursts. It's about the sophisticated way women can reframe events, change the emotional tone of interactions, and essentially rewrite the narrative of what's happening in real time. Men often find themselves living in a completely different version of reality than the one they thought they were experiencing. The theater of emotions works because women understand that feelings often matter more than facts. While men typically focus on what actually happened, the concrete events, the logical sequence, the objective details, women focus on how those events felt and what they meant emotionally. This difference in perspective allows women to take the same set of facts and create entirely different stories around them. When a woman employs emotional theater, she's not lying about her feelings. She's genuinely experiencing the emotions she's expressing, but she has the ability to shift between different emotional interpretations of the same situation with remarkable fluidity. What seemed like a minor disagreement can become a major relationship crisis. What appeared to be a simple mistake can transform into evidence of deeper problems or lack of care. Jung observed that this emotional reframing often happens through the strategic use of emotional language. Instead of saying, "You forgot to call," she might say, "I felt abandoned and unimportant when you didn't reach out." Both statements describe the same event, but the second version creates a completely different emotional reality. Suddenly, you're not just someone who forgot to make a phone call, you're someone who caused pain and emotional damage. The power of emotional theatre lies in its ability to make men question their own perception of events. You remember a conversation going one way, but she remembers the emotional undercurrents and subtle meanings that you completely missed. You thought you were being helpful, but she experienced it as controlling or dismissive. You believed you were being honest, but she felt attacked or criticized. Women often use emotional theatre to escalate or de-escalate situations based on their desired outcome. If she wants more attention or commitment, a minor issue might become a major emotional crisis that requires extensive discussion, reassurance, and promises of change. If she wants to smooth over her own mistake, she might reframe the situation to focus on her emotional state rather than her actions. The theatrical aspect involves the timing and intensity of emotional expression. A woman might remain calm and rational during the actual incident, then express intense emotions about it hours or days later. This delayed emotional response catches men off guard because the moment for addressing the issue seems to have passed, but suddenly it's the most important thing happening in the relationship. Jung noticed that emotional theatre often involves the creation of emotional debt. When a woman expresses how deeply something affected her, how much pain it caused, or how it made her question the relationship, she's creating an emotional bill that needs to be paid. You find yourself owing apologies, gestures, or changes in behavior to compensate for the emotional damage you didn't even realize you were causing. The rewriting of reality also happens through selective emotional memory. Events that made her feel good are remembered with warm, positive emotions, while events that disappointed her are remembered with disproportionate negative emotions. This creates a version of your relationship history that's organized around her emotional experiences rather than the actual sequence of events. Women use emotional theatre to shift the focus from behavior to feelings. Instead of discussing what actually happened, the conversation becomes about how it made her feel. This is particularly effective because men can't argue with feelings. They can only validate them or appear insensitive. If she says something made her feel unloved, you can't counter with logic or facts without seeming cold and uncaring. The theatrical element also involves the use of emotional metaphors and dramatic language. A forgotten anniversary becomes proof that our relationship doesn't matter to you. A busy work schedule becomes choosing your job over our love. These emotional interpretations transform ordinary life events into dramatic relationship moments that require significant attention and resolution. Jung understood that emotional theatre often serves to test the relationship and the man's commitment. By creating emotional intensity around everyday situations, women can gauge how much effort a man is willing to put into maintaining harmony and addressing her concerns. The more dramatic the emotional response, the more effort required to restore peace and connection. The power of this emotional reframing extends to future planning and decision-making. A woman might express fears, anxieties, or hopes about future scenarios with such emotional intensity that they feel more real than actual current circumstances. Her emotional projections about what might happen begin to influence present-day decisions and behaviors. Women also use emotional theatre to create shared meaning and intimacy. By expressing deep emotions about seemingly minor events, they're inviting men into their inner emotional world. When you respond appropriately to her emotional interpretation of events, you're validating not just her feelings, but her entire way of experiencing and understanding the relationship. The theatrical aspect involves the ability to switch emotional states rapidly based on the response received. If her initial emotional expression doesn't generate the desired reaction, she might escalate the intensity, change the emotional tone, or shift to a completely different emotional framework. This keeps men constantly adjusting their responses and never quite sure they've addressed the real issue. Understanding emotional theater doesn't mean dismissing women's feelings or becoming emotionally unavailable. It means recognizing when emotions are being used to reshape reality and influence behavior versus when they represent genuine, proportionate responses to actual events. The key is learning to validate feelings, while also maintaining your own perspective on what actually happened and what it reasonably means for the relationship. 6. Selective memory. What she remembers and what she forgets. Carl Jung made a fascinating discovery about how memory works differently in men and women, particularly when it comes to emotional significance and relationship dynamics. Women possess what Jung called selective emotional memory, an unconscious ability to remember events that support their current emotional narrative while forgetting or minimizing those that don't. This isn't intentional deception. It's a psychological mechanism that helps women maintain emotional consistency and relationship leverage. The female mind organizes memories around emotional themes rather than chronological accuracy. While men often remember events in sequence with factual details, women remember the emotional impact and meaning of events. This allows them to recall with perfect clarity every time you made them feel unappreciated, while having fuzzy recollection of the times you went out of your way to help them. It's not that they're lying. Their brain genuinely prioritizes emotionally significant memories over neutral or positive ones. Jung observed that selective memory often serves to support current relationship narratives. If a woman is feeling neglected, she'll easily recall multiple examples of times when you didn't pay attention to her needs. These memories will be vivid, detailed, and emotionally charged. Meanwhile, recent examples of your thoughtfulness or care might be forgotten, minimized, or reframed as exceptions rather than patterns. This memory pattern works because it creates emotional consistency. Human brains naturally seek to confirm existing beliefs and feelings rather than challenge them. When a woman feels a certain way about the relationship, her memory automatically provides supporting evidence while filtering out contradictory information. This makes her emotional responses feel justified and reasonable to her, even when they seem disproportionate to recent events. The selective aspect of memory often involves the timing and context of what's remembered. Positive gestures made during good times might be forgotten, while the same gestures made during tense periods are remembered as too little, too late. A compliment given casually might disappear from memory, while criticism spoken in frustration is remembered word for word months later. Women also demonstrate remarkable memory for emotional subtext that men often miss entirely. She'll remember not just what you said, but how you said it, what your body language suggested, and what she perceived as the hidden meaning behind your words. These emotional memories often feel more real and significant to her than the actual words spoken, creating a version of events that can seem completely different from what you remember. Jung noticed that selective memory often involves comparative frameworks. Women remember how you behaved compared to how they wanted you to behave, how you treated them compared to how they see other women being treated, or how you acted compared to earlier versions of yourself. This comparative memory creates a constantly shifting standard that can make it impossible to live up to past performance or expectations. The forgetting aspect is equally important. Acts of kindness, gestures of love, and efforts to please might fade from memory, while mistakes, disappointments, and failures remain crystal clear. This isn't conscious manipulation. It's how emotional memory naturally works. Negative events create stronger neural pathways because they trigger stress responses and survival mechanisms. Selective memory also applies to promises, agreements, and conversations about the future. A woman might clearly remember your commitment to change certain behaviors while forgetting her own promises or the context that made those commitments necessary. She might recall her emotional state during important conversations while forgetting the logical points or compromises that were discussed. This memory pattern becomes particularly powerful during arguments or relationship discussions. Women can produce detailed examples of past problems while struggling to recall recent improvements or positive changes. The emotional weight of remembered disappointments often outweighs the logical recognition of current efforts, making it difficult to resolve conflicts or move past previous issues. Jung understood that selective memory serves important psychological functions. It helps women maintain emotional protection by remembering threats to their security while forgetting temporary reassurances. It supports their advocacy for their own needs by keeping examples of neglect or mistreatment readily available. It also helps them maintain relationship standards by remembering when those standards weren't met. The selective aspect also involves rewriting the emotional significance of past events based on current circumstances. A gesture that seemed romantic at the time might be remembered as manipulative if the relationship turns sour. A conversation that felt loving might be reframed as controlling when viewed through the lens of current conflicts. Women often use selective memory to create emotional continuity across time. Instead of seeing relationship problems as isolated incidents, their memory connects them into patterns and themes. 3 separate arguments become evidence of a communication problem. 2 instances of forgetfulness become proof of not caring. This pattern recognition helps them identify relationship issues, but can also create the perception of bigger problems than actually exist. The power of selective memory lies in its emotional authenticity. When a woman recalls past hurts or disappointments, she's genuinely re-experiencing those emotions. The memories feel real and significant because they are real to her emotional experience. This makes it difficult to argue with or dismiss her recollections without seeming insensitive or gaslighting. Understanding selective memory doesn't mean keeping detailed records of every interaction or trying to prove your version of events is correct. It means recognizing that emotional memory works differently than factual memory, and that women's recollections are organized around emotional themes rather than chronological accuracy. The goal is to validate the emotional truth of her memories while also maintaining your own perspective on what happened and why. The key is learning to address the emotional patterns that selective memory reveals rather than arguing about specific factual details. If she remembers multiple times when she felt unappreciated, the solution isn't to prove those memories wrong, but to understand what would help her feel more valued going forward.